that in 2012, only 30% of Americans used an iPhone? Now in 2025, it's nearly 60%, the highest percentage of iPhone users in any country. People say Apple keeps selling the same phone, yet the numbers keep rising. How did this even happen? This is the full story of how the iPhone took over America. Before the iPhone, the American phone market felt like a cold office. You had the BlackBerry for the serious crowd, QWERT keyboards, blinking red lights, endless emails, the Motorola Razr for the cool kids, thin, metallic, but mostly a fashion statement, and the Nokia for everyone else, reliable, indestructible, but utterly forgettable. Phones existed only as a way to call, text, and if you were lucky, to check emails. Other basic things like web browsing were clunky, and mobile-specific app stores barely existed. The design was an afterthought too. In summary, you used a phone as a need, not a want. There was barely any element of attraction in your phone. Of course, carriers didn't make things easier too, like whichever carrier you had, AT&T, Verizon, etc., controlled everything. Pricing, features, even updates. If you wanted something new, you had to ask your carrier, not your manufacturer. It was like buying a car and being told by AT&T that you can't drive it outside your neighborhood. And that's the vacuum Apple saw. Phones lacked a lot of utility, and even more than that, they lacked aesthetics. The world was digital in name, but not beautifully so. The revolutionary iPhone introduction keynote was held on January 9, 2007 at Macworld 2007 in San Francisco, and it remains one of the most studied pieces of tech history. And it was magical. A widescreen iPod, a phone, an internet communicator, and then the twist. They're not three separate devices, they're one. It was a reveal so absurdly theatrical that it transcended tech and went into the realm of showmanship. But not everyone was impressed. Microsoft CEO publicly mocked it. RIM, the maker of BlackBerry, said that touchscreens would never replace keyboards. And yet, beneath all that skepticism was something new, something mythic. The iPhone was the first phone that looked expensive on purpose. Up until then, phones were built for corporations. This one was built for humans. And then it launched on June 29, 2007. Lines snaked around Apple stores like concert queues. And for what? A phone that didn't even have copy-paste? But that didn't matter, because the iPhone had become something else entirely, a status symbol. It was the first time carrying a phone was more than utility. The commercials were hypnotic, a hand, a gesture, a swipe, no specs, no jargon, just a feeling. Apple had just hit a gold mine, perhaps even more than a gold mine. And that's when America's relationship with technology changed. And this change brought a lot of big players down with it. BlackBerry doubled down on physical keyboards. Nokia bragged about battery life. But Apple was literally selling a feeling, and if there's one lesson about marketing everyone should know, is that people always prioritize feelings over technical stuff. Then came the second wave of the revolution, the App Store. If the first iPhone was the match, this was the explosion. Developers had suddenly been handed a blank canvas by Apple and told whosoever makes the best app shall start making loads of money. Within a year, the App Store went from 1,000 apps to tens of thousands. Tiny startups became tech titans. Angry Birds, Instagram, Uber. Phones truly started becoming their own separate device, beyond computers. There's an app for that. That phrase infected American culture. Need to find a restaurant? There's an app for that. Track your sleep? There's an app for that. Summon a ride? There's an app for that. And if you like tech stories and explainers like this one, there's a YouTube channel for that, Kernel. Subscribe for more content like this. And here's where Apple's true genius, or manipulation depending on how you see it, revealed itself. It started innocently. Sync your music with iTunes, back up your photos with iCloud, text your friends through iMessage. Each feature was built around one idea: ease. But with every layer of convenience also came a thread of dependence. Try switching to Android after years in Apple's system. Your group chats vanish, your photos are trapped, your workflow breaks. Then came AirPods, Apple Watch, and the MacBook handoff system. Your phone unlocks your laptop answers your calls, your watch tracks your heartbeat.
The genius of Apple lied in making this interconnectedness feel like freedom.
Now, at first, it may have seemed like this walled garden thing was an accident, but I think we now know Apple long enough now to say that it wasn't. The iPhone had basically colonized your digital life. In fact, the colonization may have went beyond digital life too. That was Apple's quietest triumph. One sync, one tap, one blue bubble at a time. Now, no company can work without advertising, and Apple is basically the master of advertising in the tech world. Like, even for the most panned Apple products, the ads still did their job in making them seem as if it's the greatest piece of tech ever. And while every other company shouted features, Apple whispered feeling. Early iPod silhouettes dancing against neon colors taught Apple one thing: emotion sells better than specs. So when the iPhone came, they didn't tell you the RAM, they showed you a thumb scrolling through photos of people you loved. That shift from specs to emotion redefined marketing across America. Suddenly, every company tried to make their product feel Apple-like, but they missed the subtlety. Apple's genius was the illusion of simplicity. Designed in California, 4 words that made manufactured in China disappear from your mind. Americans bought the calm in the chaos of tech, and that calm had an eaten fruit logo on it. By the mid-2010s, the iPhone was much more beyond a phone. It showed who you were, what group you belonged to, what version of the digital world you lived in. Movies, TV, music videos, all quietly synced with Apple's aesthetic. You never saw villains using iPhones because Apple didn't allow it. Well, not all heroes wear capes, but all have Apple logos on the back of their phones. It was found in a survey that 88% of American teens own an iPhone in 2025 itself. The blue bubble now means inclusion, and the green bubble means outsider. Even if Android offered better specs, in high schools across America, an Android is as respectable as a landline. Having an iPhone basically become an unsaid rule, the kind that quietly shaped classrooms, dating culture, workplaces. FaceTime became shorthand for intimacy, AirDrop replaced USBs, Sent from my iPhone became a social signature. What Apple pulled off culturally is a remarkable normalization. Now, here's where the story turns from emotion to economics. In unit share, Apple has never sold the majority of the world's phones, but in profit share, they've had the highest ratio in it. That's the sleight of hand. Dominance not by volume, but by value. While Samsung, Xiaomi, and others fight for fractions of the low end, Apple keeps the high ground, the top 10% of customers who never look down. Globally, Android dominates, but in the US, the numbers tell a different story, 60% and climbing. And this is when each year the criticism for Apple releasing the same phone is increasing. Now, here's where Apple's story folds back on itself. The company that told us to think different now rewards those who think alike. It preaches freedom while building the most frustratingly closed ecosystem in tech history. Another one of their most famous cards, the reason the naive would believe celebs and politicians use the iPhone, is privacy. It's their moral high ground. What happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone. And yet that privacy exists inside a walled garden they control completely. If Apple is protecting users' privacy, it also means it's on their terms entirely. That's what you call terms of service. Critics call it a cult, and maybe they're not wrong. Every September, people who swore off upgrades queue up again, convincing themselves that unnecessary black pills around your front camera is better than a simple punch hole, or that they have to pay an extra $200 to $300 for a display with 120 Hz. Because apparently an $800 phone is too cheap to justify having a 120 Hz display. So where does the story go now? Apple is no longer a tech brand. They are literally a luxury brand, in a way. But what are they doing now? The Vision Pro aimed to redefine computing again, yet its second gen literally shipped with the same specs as the first one. I mean, come on, what else did you expect? It's Apple. On the other hand, their push into health, payments, and entertainment is entanglement on another level. Apple Pay turns your phone into your wallet. Apple Watch tracks your pulse. Apple TV Plus tells your stories. Apple Intelligence, their take on AI, wants to think for you, yet still hasn't delivered and no one knows when it will. And services, the real secret, now make more money than the iPad and Mac combined. It's recurring, predictable, and impossible to escape once you've built your digital life inside it. Apple frames it all under the halo of privacy and sustainability. Their ads don't talk about the future. They talk about identity. The real question now isn't whether someone can dethrone Apple. It's whether anyone even wants to. Because when a company becomes part of your identity, it doesn't need to conquer you anymore. You'll defend it yourself. If you like this video, hit like, subscribe Kernel for more videos like these.